The scent of moonflower and sage hung heavy in the evening air, mingling with the sweet perfume of celebration. Lanterns strung between ancient oaks cast golden light across the gathering, illuminating faces flushed with anticipation and wine. I stood at the periphery, my back pressed against rough bark, watching as younger women twirled in dresses the colors of spring, their laughter rising into the night like birdsong. My fingers found the silver pendant at my throat, my mother's final gift. "When the time comes," she had whispered, "this will remind you of your worth when others forget." The cool metal warmed against my skin as I traced its intricate pattern, remembering her words as I observed what I could never join. "Eleanor," a voice called, breaking through my thoughts. My childhood friend Mara approached, her youngest daughter trailing behind her like a shadow. "Why are you hiding? Come join us." I forced a smile, smoothing down the modest midnight blue dress I'd chosen for tonight's gathering, the spring selection, where unmated wolf shifters sought potential partners under the waxing moon. At 35, I was nearly a decade older than any other unmated female present. "I'm merely observing," I replied, the lie practiced and smooth on my tongue. "The mead is better enjoyed from a distance, don't you think?" Mara's eyes softened with that particular blend of pity and concern I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "You know there are many who would still consider." "Please," I interrupted gently. "Not tonight." Before she could respond, a hush fell over the clearing. The crowd parted like water around stone, and my breath caught in my throat. The pack council had arrived. 5 imposing figures emerged from the forest's edge, each radiating power that seemed to bend the very air around them. 4 beta leaders, representing the cardinal territories of our vast northern reach pack, flanked a central figure who stood taller than the rest. Vincent Blackstone, the Alpha King, ruler of all wolf shifters in the northern territories. I'd seen him from afar at seasonal gatherings, but never this close. Never close enough to notice how the moonlight caught in his obsidian hair, or how his eyes, sharp as winter stars, seemed to assess the entire gathering in a single sweeping glance. "Let the spring selection begin," announced Thorn, the Eastern Beta, his voice carrying across the clearing. Young women straightened their dresses, while eligible men stood taller. I remained in my shadowed sanctuary, content to watch what had never been meant for me. The pendant grew heavier against my skin. The music resumed, slower now, more deliberate. Couples began to form on the earthen dance floor, the ritual of selection beginning with these first tentative pairings. I watched as Elena, barely 20 and radiant in emerald silk, was immediately approached by 3 potential suitors. "Still hoping someone might overlook your age?" I didn't need to turn to recognize Garrett's voice, smooth as honey yet sharp with disdain. My former betrothed, who'd broken our engagement 5 years ago when a younger, more fertile option had caught his eye. "I'm merely enjoying the celebration, Garrett," I replied, keeping my gaze fixed on the dancers. He moved closer, his breath warm against my ear. "No one will choose you, Eleanor. You're too old to be a bride. Your time has passed." His words were soft, meant only for me, laced with the casual cruelty that had become his hallmark. "You should have accepted Derek's offer last winter. A widower with 3 children wouldn't have been too concerned with your limitations." The pendant burned against my skin as I swallowed the retort rising in my throat. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept them carefully folded before me. "I appreciate your concern for my future," I said evenly, "but I believe that's the Eastern Beta calling for you." Garrett's jaw tightened, but he moved away, melting back into the crowd that had never seemed more distant from where I stood. I exhaled slowly, the tremor in my hands subsiding. This was why I avoided these gatherings. The pitying glances, the whispered comments, the reminder that I existed in a space between worlds, too old for new beginnings, too stubborn to settle for less than what my heart desired. The music changed, slower now, almost haunting in its melody. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself to imagine a different life, one where age was just a number and worth wasn't measured in potential offspring or years of fertility remaining. When I opened them again, I froze. Vincent Blackstone stood before me, his presence commanding even in stillness. Up close, I could see the faint scar that ran from his right temple to his cheekbone, the the flecks of silver in his otherwise midnight hair. Power radiated from him, not just the inherent strength of an alpha, but something more elemental, a force of nature contained within human form. His gaze, intense and unreadable, held mine. The clearing, the music, the whispers, everything receded until there was only this moment, suspended between one heartbeat and the next. "You're not dancing," he said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined, resonant with authority that seemed to vibrate through the air between us. I blinked, certain he must be addressing someone else. I glanced behind me, finding only the ancient oak that had been my refuge. "No," I finally managed, cursing the slight tremor in my voice. "I'm content to observe." His head tilted slightly, a gesture more wolf than man. "Are you?" The question hung between us, deceptively simple, yet laden with meaning I couldn't decipher. I found myself straightening, my hand falling away from the pendant. "It's been many years since I participated in a selection," I said carefully. "My season for such things has passed." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "Who told you that?" Before I could respond, a commotion erupted on the far side of the clearing. Raised voices shattered the harmonious atmosphere, and Vincent's attention snapped toward the disturbance. Two younger wolves, their features contorted with the beginning stages of shift, squared off, while others scrambled to move away. "Excuse me," he said, already moving toward the conflict with fluid grace that belied his size. I watched him go, my heart hammering against my ribs for reasons I couldn't fully understand. Our brief interaction left me unsettled, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet without warning. Needing a moment alone, I slipped away from the gathering, following a narrow path that led to the small lake beyond the clearing. The sounds of celebration faded behind me as I picked my way carefully through the underbrush, guided by moonlight and memory. The lake spread before me, its surface a mirror for the stars above. I settled on a fallen log at the water's edge, my reflection rippling with the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Here, away from watchful eyes and whispered judgments, I allowed my shoulders to drop, my carefully maintained composure to crack. "You shouldn't wander alone at night." I startled, nearly losing my balance on the log. Vincent Blackstone stood several paces away, his powerful frame silhouetted against the trees. How had he approached so silently? And why had he followed me? "The celebration," I began, "is well managed by my betas," he finished, moving closer until moonlight illuminated his features. "You didn't answer my question," I frowned, trying to recall. "Which question?" "Who told you your season had passed?" The directness of his inquiry caught me off guard. Alpha wolves were notoriously straightforward, but his interest in my situation was perplexing. "No one needed to tell me," I replied carefully. "It's evident in how the pack views unmated females my age. We become invisible, or worse, objects of pity." He considered this, his expression unreadable. Then, with a grace that defied his size, he sat beside me on the log, leaving a respectful distance between us. "And you accepted this assessment?" A small, bitter laugh escaped me before I could suppress it. What choice did I have? Fight against the natural order? Beg for consideration from men who clearly preferred younger mates? "The natural order," he repeated, the words sounding strange in his mouth. "Tell me, Eleanor. That is your name, correct?" I nodded, surprised he knew it. "Tell me, Eleanor, who defines this natural order you speak of? Who decided the worth of a mate lies in youth rather than character? Experience rather than naivety?" His questions hung in the air between us, challenging assumptions I'd accepted as immutable truths. Before I could formulate a response, a twig snapped nearby, and Vincent was immediately on his feet, positioning himself between me and the potential threat. A moment later, Thorn emerged from the trees, his expression shifting from urgency to surprise when he spotted me. "My king, you're needed back at the gathering," he said, his gaze darting between us with poorly concealed curiosity. "The Southerners are requesting formal introductions." Vincent nodded once. "I'll join momentarily." Thorn hesitated, then bowed slightly before disappearing back the way he had come. "It seems duty calls," I said, rising to my feet. You shouldn't keep them waiting on my account." Vincent turned to face me, his expression suddenly intense in a way that made my breath catch. "This conversation isn't finished, Eleanor." The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Perhaps another time," I offered, though we both knew there would likely never be another moment like this. Alphas didn't typically seek out conversations with unmated females my age, especially not ones as powerful as Vincent Blackstone. He studied me for a moment longer, then reached out, his fingers brushing against the silver pendant at my throat. The brief contact sent warmth cascading through me. "A beautiful piece," he said softly. "Family heirloom?" "My mother's," I managed, acutely aware of his proximity. He nodded, as though confirming something to himself. Then, with a final look that contained something I couldn't name, something that made my heart stutter in my chest, he turned and strode back toward the celebration, leaving me alone with the moonlight, the lake, and 1,000 new questions stirring in my mind. I remained by the water for several minutes more, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. By the time I returned to the clearing, Vincent was surrounded by council members and visiting dignitaries, his attention seemingly consumed by pack politics. Yet somehow, across the crowded gathering, his eyes found mine and held. 3 days passed since the spring selection, yet Vincent Blackstone's questions continued to echo in my mind. I moved through my daily routines, tending to the pack's medicinal herb garden, assisting our healer with preparing remedies, recording ancient recipes in my careful script. But my thoughts repeatedly drifted to that moonlit conversation by the lake. Who defines this natural order? Who decided the worth of a mate lies in youth rather than character? The morning air carried autumn's first whisper as I knelt among the herbs, harvesting lavender for sleeping tinctures. My knees ached slightly against the hard ground. Another small reminder of the years that separated me from the giggling young women who passed by the garden on their way to the stream. "Still mulling over your encounter with the Alpha King?" I glanced up to find Iris, the pack's elder healer, watching me with knowing eyes. At 73, she'd long been my mentor and confidant. One of the few who never treated my unmarried status as a tragedy. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, brushing soil from my hands. Iris chuckled, lowering herself carefully onto the stone bench at the garden's edge. "You've harvested the same lavender patch 3 times this morning. The plants are practically begging for mercy." Heat rose to my cheeks as I looked down at the overflowing basket. "I suppose I'm a bit distracted." "A conversation with Vincent Blackstone would distract anyone," she said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, "especially one held privately by moonlight." "It wasn't," I began, then sighed. "News travels quickly. In a wolf pack? Always." Iris patted the space beside her. "Thorn's mate told the eastern females, who told everyone else within hours. But what interests me is what wasn't in the gossip. What was actually said between you two." I hesitated, then joined her on the bench. He asked me strange questions about age and worth and who decides such things. Iris's eyes widened slightly. "Interesting." She was quiet for a moment, her weathered fingers tracing patterns on her skirt. "You know, Vincent wasn't born to be alpha." This surprised me. "But his lineage?" "Yes. His father was the previous Alpha King, but Vincent was the 3rd son, never expected to rule. He spent years traveling among human settlements, learning their ways, before his brother's deaths thrust the crown upon him." I hadn't known this. The Alpha King was something of a mystery to most of us, respected, feared, but rarely understood. That explains his unconventional perspectives. Perhaps. Iris's smile turned enigmatic. Or perhaps he simply sees what others are too blinded by tradition to notice. Before I could ask what she meant, a shadow fell across us. I looked up to find Mara standing there, excitement radiating from her like heat. "Eleanor, there you are. You'll never believe what's happening at the main hall," I frowned. "What is it?" "The Alpha King has called a special council. All unmated females are required to attend." She paused, her eyes wide, regardless of age. My heart lurched in my chest. "When?" "Now. They're gathering everyone as we speak." Iris's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "You should go. Change your dress first. The blue one, I think." I glanced down at my dirt-stained work clothes and nodded, rising on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. Whatever this gathering might mean, I couldn't attend looking like I'd been rolling in the herb garden. 20 minutes later, I stood among 24 females in the great hall, the midnight blue dress, the same I'd worn to the selection, smooth against my skin. I'd hastily washed my face and rebraided my light blonde hair, though a few stubborn strands had already escaped to frame my face. I was the oldest by far among the assembled women. Most were in their early 20s, with a few barely past their 18th year. They clustered together, exchanging excited whispers and smoothing already perfect dresses. I stood apart, as always, my mother's pendant cool against my throat. The massive door swung open, and silence fell immediately. Vincent entered, flanked by his 4 beta counselors. His gaze swept the room, and though it didn't linger on me, I felt a strange certainty that he had marked my presence. "Thank you for answering the summons," he said, his deep voice filling the hall without effort. "I'll be direct. The Alpha Packs have maintained isolation for too long. The world beyond our territories grows more complex, and our understanding of it must evolve." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was unexpected. Traditionally, pack politics were kept separate from selection matters. "To that end," Vincent continued, "I'm establishing a diplomatic council. 5 females will be chosen to serve alongside my betas, building relations with neighboring packs, and eventually, human settlements." The whispers grew louder. Female representatives were rare enough. Diplomatic roles for unmated females were unprecedented. "This isn't a marriage selection," Vincent clarified, silencing the excited chatter. "This is about capability, intelligence, and perspective. The chosen females will live in the Central Territory, receiving training in diplomacy, strategy, and defense." His eyes found mine then, holding for the briefest moment before moving on. "Age and experience will be considered assets, not liabilities." My breath caught. Was this for my benefit? The very idea seemed absurd, yet the timing, following our lakeside conversation. "Those interested will undergo 3 trials," announced Thorne, stepping forward. "The first begins tomorrow at dawn. Intellectual assessment, physical capability, and judgment under pressure will all be tested." The assembly erupted in excited conversation as the council members departed. Young women gathered in clusters, already strategizing or preening at the prospect of living in the Central Territory, close to eligible high-ranking males. I remained still, conflicted. The position sounded intriguing, meaningful work that valued the very experience that had rendered me too old in the marriage market. Yet I couldn't shake the suspicion that this unprecedented opportunity had something to do with my conversation with Vincent. The timing was too convenient, his words about age and worth too fresh in my mind. "You're going to compete, aren't you?" Mara appeared at my side, her eyes bright with excitement. "I'm not sure it would be appropriate," I said carefully. She scoffed. "Didn't you hear him? Age and experience will be considered assets. He might as well have pointed at you directly." "That's precisely what concerns me," I admitted. "If this is some form of charity—" "Eleanor." Mara's tone sharpened. "Stop undermining yourself. You're the most knowledgeable herbalist after Iris. You speak 3 languages. You've maintained correspondence with traders from the coastal regions for years. If anyone deserves a place on this council, it's you." Her faith in me was touching, if perhaps misplaced. "There will be younger, stronger competitors. So, let them outthink you then." She squeezed my arm. "Promise me you'll at least try. What do you have to lose?" "What indeed?" I thought of my quiet life, fulfilling in its way, yet increasingly isolated as friends paired off and focused on their growing families. I thought of my mother's pendant. Her words, "This will remind you of your worth when others forget." "Very well," I said finally. "I'll participate in the first trial, at least." Dawn found me at the edge of the central clearing, dressed practically in leggings and a fitted tunic that allowed freedom of movement. About 15 females had gathered, fewer than had attended the announcement, but more competition than I'd expected. Most were in their 20s, though I spotted 2 girls barely out of adolescence, nervously shifting their weight from foot to foot. Elena, Garrett's chosen bride, stood among them, her perfect features arranged in an expression of determined confidence. When she noticed me, surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by poorly concealed disdain. "Ladies." Thorne's voice cut through the morning air as he approached, scrolls tucked under one arm. "The first trial tests your knowledge of our territories, neighboring packs, and potential allies or threats. You'll have 2 hours to complete your responses." A reasonable start. I'd always been an avid reader, particularly of the geographical and political texts in our small but well-maintained pack library. We were led to a long table set up beneath the ancient oak trees. The morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating dappled patterns across the parchment Thorne placed before each of us. I scanned the questions quickly, relief washing over me. This, at least, I could manage. Questions about the 5 major river systems that defined pack territories, historical conflicts between the northern and eastern packs, trade routes to human settlements, resources unique to each region, potential diplomatic leverage with the isolated mountain wolves. I worked steadily, my quill moving across the parchment with confidence. Occasionally, I glanced up to see some of the younger women staring at their papers in obvious distress. Elena, however, wrote with focused determination, her brow furrowed in concentration. By the time Thorne called for our submissions, I'd answered every question thoroughly, drawing on years of quiet study and conversations with traveling merchants who often sought healing herbs from our garden. "Results will be posted by midday," Thorne announced. "The second trial begins this afternoon for those who advance." As we dispersed, Elena sidled up beside me, her voice pitched low, impressive effort for someone your age. "Though I wonder if your physical limitations will become apparent in the next trial." I met her gaze steadily. "Then it's fortunate that knowledge was tested first, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed slightly before she turned away, joining a group of younger competitors who welcomed her with admiring smiles. I made my way back to my small cottage on the pack's eastern boundary, changing into a fresh tunic and allowing myself a brief rest. The mental exertion had been more taxing than I'd anticipated, and the thought of a physical trial in the afternoon sent a flutter of anxiety through my stomach. A knock at my door roused me from uneasy contemplation. I opened it to find Iris standing there, a small leather pouch in her hands. "I thought you might need this," she said, pressing the pouch into my palm. I opened it to find a mixture of dried herbs, ginseng for energy, willow bark for potential pain, and something else I didn't immediately recognize. "What's this dark leaf?" I asked, rubbing it between my fingers. A smile crept across Iris's weathered face. "Something I've been cultivating quietly. It strengthens the connection between human form and wolf spirit, makes shifting easier, less draining." I looked up sharply. "The physical trial will likely involve shifting," she finished. "Most younger wolves take their abilities for granted, shifting casually and often. But those of us with more years," she tapped the pouch, "we can use every advantage. Steep a small pinch in hot water. Drink it before you return." I hesitated. "Is this permitted?" Iris chuckled. "It's a plant that grows in our territory. No different than eating protein before exertion or wearing proper footwear. Strategy, Eleanor. Use every tool at your disposal." After she left, I prepared the tea as instructed, its earthy aroma filling my small kitchen. As I drank, warmth spread through my limbs, settling into my bones with a pleasant hum that made my wolf stir beneath my skin. When I returned to the clearing at midday, a small crowd had gathered around the results posted on the great oak. I waited until the space cleared before approaching, steeling myself against disappointment. 10 names were listed for advancement to the second trial. My gaze moved down the list, and there, in the 7th position, was my name. I'd advanced. "Congratulations." I turned to find Vincent Blackstone standing a few paces away, his imposing figure somehow having approached without my notice. His dark eyes studied me with that same unreadable expression from the lakeside. "Thank you," I managed, suddenly acutely aware of my simple clothing and wind-tousled hair, though I've only passed the first hurdle. "Knowledge is the foundation of all else," he said, stepping closer. "Without it, strength and speed are merely blunt instruments wielded blindly." His proximity sent my heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety about the upcoming trial. Up close, I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes, smell the distinct scent of pine and something uniquely him. Powerful, compelling. "The physical trial," I said, attempting to maintain my composure. What should we expect? A slight smile curved his lips. Preparing your strategy already? Good. He glanced toward the forest's edge. It will test endurance, instinct, and adaptability. Your wolf will need to work in harmony with your human mind. Before I could ask more, Elena approached, her steps faltering slightly when she noticed Vincent. She bowed her head respectfully. Alpha King, I was hoping to speak with you about the diplomatic initiatives you mentioned, she said, her voice honey-sweet. My father's connections with the Southern Territories could prove valuable. Vincent's expression revealed nothing. All advantages and connections will be considered equally during the trials, Elena. No candidate receives special consideration. His gaze flickered briefly to me. The field must be level for everyone. With a slight nod to us both, he departed, leaving Elena staring after him with barely concealed frustration. Interesting, she said quietly, turning to me. He knows your name too. The implication hung in the air between us, but I refused to engage. Good luck with the second trial, I said simply, then turned away, heading toward the forest where the next challenge awaited. Whatever happened in the hours to come, I'd already proven something to myself. Perhaps that was victory enough. The forest had always been my sanctuary, a place of solitude and reflection, but today it loomed before me as a challenge to be conquered. 15 candidates remained, standing at the edge of the dense woodland that bordered our territory to the north. The physical trial would take place within its shadows. Your task, announced Thorn, his voice carrying across our assembled group, is simple in description, but complex in execution. Within the forest are 5 markers, each guarded by one of our senior warriors. You must locate at least 3 markers and return here before sunset. Murmurs rippled through our group. The forest stretched for miles, and 5 markers could be hidden anywhere within its vast expanse. You will travel in your wolf form, Thorn continued. This tests not only your physical endurance, but your connection to your primal instincts. The markers emit a subtle scent detectable only to those who fully embrace their wolf senses. My stomach tightened. I hadn't shifted in months, perhaps longer. Unlike the younger wolves, who changed forms as easily as changing clothes, my transformations had become increasingly taxing with age. Iris's tea hummed through my veins. But would it be enough? One final note, Thorn said, his gaze sweeping over us. The Guardians will not simply surrender the markers. You must demonstrate cunning, strategy, or strength to convince them to relinquish their charge. Violence is forbidden, but persuasion takes many forms. Elena smirked, tossing her hair. She, like many younger females, undoubtedly planned to rely on her beauty and charm. Weapons I could no longer wield with the same effect. The trial begins now, Thorn announced. You may shift when ready. The younger women began their transformations immediately, their bodies blurring as they dropped to all fours, bones reshaping, fur sprouting across their skin. Within moments, a dozen wolves stood where young women had been, their coats ranging from russet to black to pale gray. I moved slightly apart, closing my eyes to focus. The tea's warmth intensified as I called to my wolf, feeling her stir beneath my skin. The familiar ache began, the price of transformation growing steeper with each passing year. Come, I whispered internally. We need each other today. The shift began slowly, then accelerated as Iris's herbs took effect. Bones reformed with less pain than usual, muscles stretched and reconfigured, and fur, pale blonde like my hair, rippled across my body. When I opened my eyes, the world had transformed into a tapestry of scents and sounds. Colors muted, but textures infinitely sharper. My wolf was smaller than most, lean and quick rather than powerfully built. But her senses were keen. I inhaled deeply, sorting through the forest's complex aromatics. Decomposing leaves, animal trails, moisture gathering in the hollows of ancient trees. The other wolves had already disappeared into the trees, eager to claim their markers. I took a more measured approach, circling the forest's edge, analyzing wind patterns. If the markers emitted scent, the afternoon breeze could carry hints of their locations. There, a faint anomaly in the air, something that didn't belong to the forest's natural perfume. I angled northwest, moving at a steady trot that preserved energy while covering ground efficiently. The scent grew stronger as I penetrated deeper into the woods, sunlight dimming as the canopy thickened overhead. After 20 minutes of careful tracking, I slowed, sensing a presence ahead. One of the guardians. I crept forward, keeping to the shadows. In a small clearing stood Mason, one of our most experienced warriors. Around his neck hung a small leather pouch, the marker. He seemed relaxed but alert, his experienced eyes scanning the surrounding trees. Direct confrontation would be futile. Mason had 3 decades of combat training, and even in my prime, I would never have overpowered him. I needed another approach. I circled the clearing, considering my options. Mason had always been intellectually curious, often visiting the healer's cottage to learn about medicinal plants. Perhaps. I shifted back to human form, the transformation quicker, but still draining. From a small pouch tied at my waist, I removed a sprig of the rare moonshade plant I'd harvested weeks ago. Its silver-blue leaves were distinctive, used in only our most potent healing mixtures. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the clearing, the moonshade held before me. Mason turned sharply, then relaxed when he recognized me. "Eleanor?" he said, his voice revealing surprise. "I didn't expect you to be among the candidates." "Knowledge takes many forms," I replied, holding up the moonshade, including knowing what might interest a particular guardian. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by appreciation. "The elusive moonshade. Iris mentioned you'd found a new growth near the eastern ridge." I nodded. "This specimen shows unusual coloration in the secondary leaves, perhaps indicating higher potency or a mutation worth studying." Mason's eyes fixed on the plant, his interest evident. "A trade, then?" "Information for information," I suggested. "The marker for knowledge of where to find this particular strain." A smile spread across his weathered face. "Cunning rather than force. Well played." He removed the marker from around his neck, extending it toward me. "The location?" As I described the hidden gully where the moonshade grew, I felt a strange pride. I might lack the physical advantages of youth, but experience had its own weapons. Marker secured, I shifted again. More painful this time, Iris's tea wearing thin, and continued deeper into the forest. The second scent trail led me northeast, toward the rocky terrain that bordered mountain wolf territory. This time, I found Lydia, her powerful frame blocking a narrow pass between 2 large boulders. The marker hung from her belt. Unlike Mason, Lydia was all physicality, our pack's combat instructor, with little interest in intellectual pursuits. I observed from concealment, noting how she paced the small area, occasionally glancing skyward to track the sun's position. 3 younger candidates had already tried and failed to claim her marker. I could smell their defeated scents retreating in different directions. This required a different strategy. Instead of hiding my approach, I emerged openly from the trees, still in wolf form. Lydia's eyes narrowed as she assessed me, older, smaller, seemingly less threatening than other candidates. I lowered myself to the ground, a non-threatening posture, then deliberately turned my gaze to a point beyond her shoulder. Curious, she glanced behind her, finding nothing, but giving me the opportunity to dart forward with unexpected speed. Not toward her, but toward the narrow crevice in the rock face behind her position. She whirled back, startled by my movement, then barked a laugh when she realized what I'd done. The crevice was a natural amplifier. Any sound made within it would echo throughout the mountain pass, potentially drawing other wolves to our location. I positioned myself at its entrance, making my intention clear. Cooperate or face interference from additional candidates, complicating her task. "Clever," Lydia conceded, unclipping the marker from her belt. "Using the environment rather than matching strength directly. You've earned this." I accepted the marker with a respectful nod, already calculating my next move. 2 markers claimed, 1 more needed before sunset. The sun had begun its westward descent. I had perhaps 2 hours remaining. My third target proved more elusive. The scent trail meandered, doubling back on itself several times, deliberately confusing any trackers. I recognized the tactics of Adrian, our tracking specialist. He wouldn't be outsmarted easily. Following the false trails would waste precious time. Instead, I considered Adrian's personality, his typical strategies. He valued efficiency above all else, which meant I changed direction, heading for the highest point in the forest, an ancient lightning-struck oak that towered above the surrounding trees. From there, Adrian could observe much of the forest while staying hidden. The climb taxed my already weary muscles, but I forced myself onward, shifting back to human form to use my hands for the final ascent. As I suspected, Adrian perched among the uppermost branches, the marker dangling from a limb just out of easy reach. "Impressive deduction," he called down when he spotted me. "Most have been running in circles following my false trails." I clung to the trunk, catching my breath. "You've always preferred the high ground. Tactically sound." He smiled, but made no move to lower the marker. "Now that you've found me, how do you plan to claim your prize? Those branches won't support your weight." He was right. The upper limbs were too thin for me to climb out and retrieve the marker directly. Another puzzle to solve. I studied our surroundings, noting how the afternoon breeze made the branches sway. An idea formed. "The trial forbids violence," I said, "but says nothing about property." Before he could respond, I broke off a nearby dead branch and used it to create leverage against a living limb. The resulting tension pulled the smaller branches in Adrian's area, setting them swaying more violently. The marker's branch bent, dipped, and finally snapped under the pressure. The leather pouch tumbled down through the layers of foliage. I caught it before it hit the ground, securing my third marker. Adrian's laugh echoed from above. "Well executed. I look forward to seeing what you do in the third trial." The return journey tested my endurance to its limits. Exhaustion from multiple shifts and physical exertion weighed on me, each step requiring conscious effort. When the forest's edge finally came into view, the sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in vivid oranges and reds. I emerged from the trees to find Thorn waiting, tallying the returning candidates. Several had already returned, including Elena, who sat on a boulder, looking remarkably unruffled despite the trial's challenges. 3 markers, I announced, presenting my hard-won trophies. Thorn's eyebrows rose slightly as he recorded my success. "Well done, Eleanor. You're the 5th to complete the trial successfully." I nodded, too tired for conversation, and moved to rest against a nearby tree. My body ached, muscles protesting every movement, but satisfaction warmed me more effectively than any fire. I had passed the second trial. As twilight deepened, the final count was made. Of 15 who began, only 8 had secured the required 3 markers before sunset. Elena, of course, was among them, as were 2 other younger females whose names I barely knew. The remaining successful candidates were older, though still younger than me, their expressions reflecting the same weary pride I felt. "The final trial will take place tomorrow evening," Thorn announced. "Rest well. You'll need your wits and courage for what comes next." As we dispersed, Elena fell into step beside me, her voice pitched low. "Surprised you managed it, especially with the shifting requirements. Must have been difficult at your age." The barb was delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Age provides alternatives to brute force," I replied evenly. "But congratulations on your success as well." Her smile tightened. "Just don't get too comfortable. The final trial typically requires personal appeal, the ability to influence through presence and persuasion." The implication was clear. Whatever the third challenge entailed, she believed youth and beauty would prevail, where knowledge and strategy could not. Perhaps she was right, but I had come too far to surrender now. I was nearly to my cottage when a figure emerged from the shadows of the communal gathering hall. Vincent Blackstone stood in the fading light, his powerful frame unmistakable even in the growing darkness. "Walk with me," he said. Not a question, but not quite a command either. Despite my exhaustion, I found myself falling into step beside him as he led us toward the quiet lake shore. We walked in silence until reaching the water's edge, where silver moonlight danced across gentle waves. "You retrieved markers from Mason, Lydia, and Adrian," he said finally. I glanced at him, surprised. "You were watching?" "I observe all trials personally, though discreetly." His gaze remained on the water. "Your approaches were unexpected. Is that a criticism or a compliment?" The question slipped out before I could temper it with more formal language. Fatigue had lowered my usual barriers. To my surprise, Vincent chuckled. A deep, warm sound I'd never heard from him before. Decidedly the latter. Most candidates attempted to overpower or charm their way to success. You analyzed each guardian and crafted a specific strategy. I used what I had available, I said simply. He turned to face me fully then, moonlight catching the silver strands in his dark hair. And what will you use tomorrow, Eleanor? What weapons do you possess for the final trial? The directness of his question caught me off guard. I don't know what the trial entails, don't you? His eyes, intense and unreadable, held mine. The first trial tested knowledge. The second, physical capability and adaptability. What remains to be evaluated in potential diplomatic representatives? Understanding dawned. Judgment under pressure. Social intelligence. He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. 8 candidates remain. Tomorrow you'll face the council, all 5 of us, with a diplomatic scenario requiring immediate response. Your decisions, your composure, your persuasiveness, all will determine your fitness for the role. My heart sank slightly. This was where Elena's youth and natural charisma would shine, where my age might truly become a disadvantage rather than a strength. Vincent must have read something in my expression, for he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You doubt yourself still. It wasn't a question. I glanced away, unable to maintain eye contact with the intensity of his gaze. Elena was right about one thing, I admitted. Personal appeal matters in diplomacy. Youth, beauty, charm. These are weapons I can no longer wield as effectively as the younger candidates. Is that what you believe diplomacy requires? Pretty faces and charming smiles? The edge in his voice drew my eyes back to his. I've seen beautiful envoys start wars with careless words, while plain-spoken truth-tellers forge lasting peace. His conviction was almost tangible in the night air between us. I found myself wanting to believe him. To believe that experience and judgment might truly be valued over the superficial advantages of youth. Rest, he said, his tone gentler now. Tomorrow comes soon enough. As he turned to leave, a question burned in my throat, demanding voice despite my better judgment. Why did you create these positions now? I called after him. Was it because of what I said at the lake? Vincent paused, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the moonlit water. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Let's say, he replied finally, that our conversation confirmed what I had long suspected, that our pack wastes valuable resources when we discard experience in favor of youth alone. With that enigmatic response, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving me standing alone by the water's edge, my mother's pendant warm against my skin. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, my mind racing with possibilities for the final trial. By morning, I had dark circles beneath my eyes and muscles that protested every movement. After effects of yesterday's multiple shifts. I soaked in a hot bath infused with healing herbs, letting the warmth seep into my aching body while rehearsing diplomatic scenarios in my head. A knock at my door roused me from contemplation. I wrapped myself in a robe and found Mara on my doorstep, her eyes bright with excitement. Everyone's talking about yesterday's trial, she said, bustling past me into the cottage. They say you outwitted 3 senior warriors without once resorting to physical confrontation. I poured us both tea, wincing as my shoulder twinged. I merely played to my strengths. Which is precisely why you'll excel today as well. She set a large package on my table. I brought you this for the final trial. I unwrapped the brown paper to find a dress of deep sapphire blue, its fabric flowing like water through my fingers. Unlike the fashions favored by younger wolves, all low necklines and form-fitting silhouettes, this gown was elegantly tailored, with intricate silver embroidery at the collar and sleeves. Mara, I can't accept this, I protested. It must have cost nothing compared to seeing my dearest friend take her rightful place on the council, she interrupted firmly. Besides, the neckline will showcase your mother's pendant perfectly. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, I managed, the words inadequate for the depth of my gratitude. Now, she said briskly, tell me what you know about the final trial. I repeated what Vincent had shared, a diplomatic scenario requiring judgment under pressure. The younger candidates will have beauty and charm on their side, Mara scoffed. Beauty fades faster than spring blossoms. What remains is character. She squeezed my hand. Show them yours. After she left, I spent the day in quiet preparation, reviewing historical diplomatic conflicts from the pack archives, practicing calming breathing techniques, and finally, as evening approached, donning the beautiful gown. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. The sapphire fabric complemented my fair complexion, while the cut of the dress lent dignity to my slender frame. My blonde hair, streaked with a few strands of silver, fell in loose waves around my shoulders. Mara's suggestion, rather than my usual practical braid. My mother's pendant gleamed at my throat, catching the light with every breath. I looked not young, certainly, but striking in a way that owed nothing to youth and everything to presence. The main hall buzzed with nervous energy when I arrived. The 8 remaining candidates gathered in a small antechamber, each dressed in their finest attire. Elena wore a gown of emerald silk that displayed her youthful curves to maximum advantage, her dark hair arranged in an elaborate style, adorned with small jewels. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfect features before her mask of confidence returned. "Individual assessments," she informed me, her tone carefully neutral. "They're calling us in one by one. 2 have already gone." I nodded, taking a seat on one of the wooden benches that lined the wall. "Do we know the scenario?" "Different for each candidate, apparently," replied an older woman named Sarah, her expression tense. Valerie emerged looking shaken. Wouldn't say what they asked her. Before I could respond, the heavy oak door opened, and Thorne appeared. "Eleanor," he called, "the council will see you now." Heart hammering against my ribs, I rose and followed him into the main chamber. The vast room had been transformed. Instead of the usual long tables, 5 ornate chairs formed a semicircle at the center. In them sat Vincent and the 4 beta leaders, each wearing formal attire that emphasized their authority. A single chair faced them, positioned in the center of their arc. A clear physical manifestation of being judged from all sides. "Eleanor," Vincent acknowledged as I took my seat. His face revealed nothing, though his eyes lingered briefly on the pendant at my throat. "Thank you for your participation in the trials thus far." I inclined my head respectfully, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremor. "Thank you for the opportunity, Alpha King." "The scenario you will address," began Nathaniel, the Northern Beta, "involves a delicate situation with the Southern Pack. Their delegation arrives tomorrow, claiming that one of our hunters trespassed on their territory and killed a protected white stag. They demand reparations and a formal apology from the Alpha King himself." I nodded, processing the information. The white stag was sacred to the Southern wolves. Killing one was not merely poaching but sacrilege in their culture. "Our hunter," continued Nathaniel, "swears he never crossed the boundary markers. He admits to tracking a white stag, but insists the kill occurred well within our territory. The Southern delegation includes their high priestess," added Rebecca, the Southern Beta. "She is volatile in matters of religious significance." "You have been assigned as liaison," Vincent said, his deep voice drawing my full attention. "The delegation refuses to meet with me until preliminary terms are established. You must navigate this first encounter, determine the truth, and establish a foundation for resolution, all without committing us to unwarranted concessions or insulting their spiritual beliefs." I took a measured breath. "May I ask questions to clarify the situation?" Vincent nodded once. "The hunter, does he have a history of boundary violations or dishonesty?" "None," replied Thorne. "Evan is young but respected, with an impeccable record." "And the white stag, was it examined? Any distinctive markings that might identify it specifically as the sacred animal from Southern territory rather than a similar creature from our forests?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow, appearing impressed by the question. "The carcass was ceremonially burned by the Southern advance scout who discovered it, as their custom dictates for sacred animals." "Convenient," I murmured. Then more clearly, "So we have no evidence either way, just conflicting claims." "Precisely," said Vincent. "Now tell us how you would approach this encounter." I considered for a moment, organizing my thoughts. "I would begin by receiving them with full ceremonial honors according to Southern custom, sacred herbs burning, offering of unsweetened berries, and ritual washing before discussions begin. This demonstrates respect for their spiritual practices without admitting guilt. Nathaniel nodded slightly, making a note on the parchment before him. Rather than addressing the accusation immediately, I would invite their high priestess to explain the white stag's significance in their culture, allowing her to feel heard and establishing that we recognize the seriousness of the matter from their perspective. She will demand immediate acknowledgement of our transgression, countered Rebecca. Southern wolves are not known for patience in religious matters. Which is precisely why patience must be modeled, I responded. I would listen fully to their grievances, then suggest a joint ritual at the site of the kill, inviting both their spiritual leaders and our hunter to return to the location. Vincent leaned forward slightly. To what purpose? Twofold, I explained. First, returning to the site might reveal physical evidence we currently lack: tracks, scent markers, territorial signs that could establish where the kill truly occurred. Second, regardless of the outcome, sharing in a ritual acknowledges the spiritual loss without accepting blame for causing it. And if the evidence confirms our hunter crossed the boundary, asked Thorne, then we offer appropriate reparations, not from coercion but from principle. We acknowledge the violation, punish the hunter according to both our laws and theirs, and perhaps offer to participate in the raising of a new sacred animal. And if the evidence confirms the kill occurred in our territory, pressed Nathaniel, then we still acknowledge their loss while firmly establishing our innocence. I would suggest a boundary clarification ritual, renewing the markers between our territories to prevent future confusion. This transforms conflict into an opportunity for strengthened relations. The council members exchanged glances. Rebecca made another notation, her expression unreadable. The High Priestess, Vincent said, his tone suddenly sharper, accuses you personally of orchestrating the hunter's actions as an intentional insult to Southern spiritual practices. She demands you be removed from negotiations. Your response? The unexpected accusation sent a jolt through me, but I maintained my composure. I would calmly state that while I respect her pain and understand how grief might seek targets, I had no involvement with the hunter's actions. I would then offer to step aside temporarily, not out of guilt, but as a demonstration of our commitment to truth above pride. I would suggest another liaison continue while I undergo a ritual cleansing to remove any spiritual taint she perceives in me. Vincent's eyes held mine, searching. Removing yourself from negotiations could be seen as weakness or admission of guilt, or as strength and flexibility, I countered. By voluntarily stepping back rather than defensively clinging to position, I demonstrate that our priority is resolution, not protecting individual egos, even my own. This often disarms those who come seeking conflict, rather than solution. A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Final question, said Thorne. The Southern Alpha, known for his temper, unexpectedly joins the delegation. He insults our Alpha King directly, calling him weak for sending a female, an aging female at that, to resolve what should be settled between male leaders. Your response? Heat flushed my cheeks, but I kept my voice measured. I would remind the Southern Alpha that wisdom lies in choosing the right tool for each task. A blade may be impressive, but sometimes a needle accomplishes what a sword cannot. In matters requiring delicate precision rather than brute force, our Alpha King demonstrates true strength by selecting based on capability rather than tradition. I paused, then added, I would also note that age brings perspective. Young wolves see only the prey before them. Seasoned hunters understand the entire forest. Silence fell over the chamber. Vincent studied me intently, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. The four betas exchanged glances, some making final notations on their parchments. Thank you, Eleanor, Vincent said finally. You may go. Results will be announced tomorrow at midday. I rose, bowed respectfully to the council, and departed with as much grace as my trembling legs allowed. Outside, I released a shuddering breath, uncertain whether my performance had impressed or alienated the council. Elena waited in the antechamber, rising gracefully as I emerged. How was it? She asked, curiosity overcoming our rivalry momentarily. Challenging, I replied truthfully. They present a complex diplomatic scenario and evaluate your proposed approach. She nodded, her confidence visibly returning. Diplomacy is all about making people like you and want to please you. I excel at that. As she swept past me into the council chamber, I wondered if she was right. Perhaps charm and beauty would indeed prove more valuable than experience and judgment. Perhaps I had once again reached for something beyond my grasp. The night passed slowly, sleep eluding me entirely as I replayed the trial in my mind, questioning every response, imagining better answers I might have given. By dawn, I had abandoned any attempt at rest, instead walking to the lake to watch the sun rise over the water. The morning mist hung low over the surface, creating ethereal shapes that danced and swirled with each gentle breeze. I sat on the fallen log, the same one where Vincent and I had spoken that first night, and let the peace of the place wash over me. "You're up early," I startled, turning to find Vincent standing a few paces away. How did he always manage to approach so silently? "As are you," I replied, my voice husky from lack of sleep. He moved closer, gesturing to the space beside me on the log. "May I?" I nodded, shifting slightly to make room, acutely aware of his proximity as he settled next to me. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the mist reshape itself across the lake's surface. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked finally. "Too many thoughts," I admitted, second-guessing every word I spoke yesterday. He nodded, his gaze still on the water. "A common affliction after such trials. For what it's worth, your answers were illuminating." The ambiguity of his response made me smile despite my nervousness. Illuminating could mean many things. A wildfire is illuminating, but also destructive. A low chuckle escaped him. Not destructive, no, though perhaps challenging to certain established perspectives. We lapsed into silence again, strangely comfortable despite the power imbalance between us. "May I ask you something?" I ventured finally. He turned slightly toward me, an invitation to continue. "Why are you really creating this diplomatic council? Our pack has maintained isolation for generations. What changed?" Vincent was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "When I traveled among humans, I saw something our kind has forgotten. Their societies value diverse voices, young and old, male and female. They understand that security comes not from strength alone, but from connection." He paused. "Our isolation has made us stagnant, set in traditions that may have served us once but now hold us back." "Like discarding females after their prime mating years?" I asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. His eyes, when they met mine, held unexpected warmth. "Like wasting the wisdom and perspective of our most experienced members, yes. The diplomatic council is one step toward changing that." The sincerity in his voice stirred something in me. Hope, perhaps, or the first fragile tendrils of trust. Before I could respond, voices called from the direction of the village. The council members emerged from the tree line, followed by the candidates and what appeared to be most of the pack. "It seems," Vincent said, rising to his feet, "that the announcement has been moved forward." My heart lurched painfully against my ribs. This was it. The moment that would determine whether my efforts had earned me a place or merely set me up for public disappointment. "Shall we?" Vincent extended his hand to help me rise. I hesitated only briefly before placing my fingers in his, feeling the strength and warmth of his grip as he assisted me to my feet. Together, we walked back toward the gathering, his hand falling away as we reached the assembled crowd. Thorn stepped forward as we approached, his expression revealing nothing. "Alpha King, the council has reached its decision regarding the diplomatic appointments." Vincent nodded. "Proceed." The candidates formed a loose semicircle before the council members, our faces composed but tension radiating from each of us. Elena stood directly across from me, her perfect features arranged in an expression of confident anticipation. "After careful evaluation of all 3 trials," Thorn announced, "the council has selected the following 5 candidates to serve as our diplomatic representatives." The crowd fell silent, anticipation thick in the air, as he unfolded a parchment and began to read. "Sarah Edwards," Thorn read, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. The older woman beside me exhaled sharply, her shoulders dropping in relief. A good choice. Sarah had decades of experience as a teacher, with natural diplomatic instincts. Valerie Clark. Another seasoned choice. Valerie had traveled extensively in her youth and spoke several human languages fluently. Elena Morris. No surprise there. Despite my misgivings about her attitude, Elena's intelligence and natural charisma made her a logical selection. She stepped forward, accepting the position with a graceful bow that nonetheless conveyed triumph. 2 positions remained. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain those with enhanced hearing could detect it. Thorne's eyes swept over the remaining candidates before returning to his parchment. Lydia Winters. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lydia was one of the warriors who had guarded markers during the second trial. Not a candidate at all. Yet the choice made sense. Her combat expertise would be valuable in assessing security concerns during diplomatic missions. 1 position left. I forced myself to breathe normally, to keep my expression neutral, despite the hope and fear warring within me. Thorne paused, his gaze meeting Vincent's for the briefest moment before he announced the final name, Eleanor Reed. Time seemed to suspend as the sound of my name hung in the air. Had I imagined it? But no. Thorne was looking directly at me, and heads were turning in my direction. I had been chosen. The 5 representatives will begin their training immediately, Thorne continued. But his words seemed distant, as though coming from underwater. You will relocate to the Central Territory within 3 days. The formal announcement complete, the crowd began to disperse. Some approached the newly appointed representatives with congratulations. Others, particularly those with unsuccessful candidates in their families, departed quickly, disappointment evident in their postures. Elena was immediately surrounded by admirers, her laughter ringing across the clearing as she accepted their praise. By contrast, I stood somewhat apart, still processing the reality that I had earned a place. "Congratulations," said a quiet voice beside me. I turned to find Iris, her weathered face wreathed in a knowing smile. "I can hardly believe it," I admitted. She took my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. "I can. You've always been more than others could see." Her eyes, wise with decades of observation, studied my face, though it seems our Alpha King sees clearly enough. Before I could respond to her cryptic statement, Mara burst through the crowd, enveloping me in a tight embrace that nearly knocked me off balance. "I knew it!" she exclaimed, pulling back to beam at me. "When they called your name, I nearly screamed." "I think you did scream," I laughed, her joy infectious. "This calls for celebration," she declared. "A small gathering at my home tonight. Nothing extravagant, just close friends honoring your achievement." I opened my mouth to protest. Celebrations had never been my forte. But Iris interrupted. "An excellent idea. Eleanor needs to mark this transition properly." Outnumbered, I conceded with a nod. "Something small," I emphasized. As Mara hurried off to make arrangements, Thorne approached, his official demeanor somewhat relaxed now that the ceremony had concluded. "The Alpha King requests your presence," he said, in private. Curious glances followed as I accompanied Thorne to the council building, a sturdy structure of stone and timber that served as the administrative center of our pack. He led me to a side entrance, then up a narrow staircase to a part of the building I'd never entered. "Wait here," he instructed, gesturing to a small antechamber before continuing down the hallway. The room was simply furnished but elegant. A polished wooden table, several comfortable chairs, and large windows that offered views of the forest beyond the settlement. I moved to the window, watching as pack members returned to their daily routines following the announcement. "They'll adjust quickly," came Vincent's deep voice from the doorway. "Our kind always does." I turned to face him, uncertain of the proper protocol. Should I bow? Address him formally? He seemed to sense my hesitation and gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit. This isn't a formal meeting." I settled into one of the chairs, noticing that he chose to sit across from me rather than behind the imposing desk at the room's far end, a choice that subtly equalized our positions. "You're wondering why I asked to speak with you separately," he said, his directness as refreshing as always. The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted. "2 reasons. First, to personally congratulate you. Your performance throughout the trials was exemplary, particularly your response to the diplomatic scenario." "Thank you," I said, warmth spreading through me at his praise, though I'm sure others performed equally well. They performed differently, he corrected. Each selected representative brings unique strengths to the council. Yours happens to be a perspective I find particularly valuable. The intensity of his gaze made me glance away momentarily. And the second reason? To discuss your specific role within the diplomatic council. He leaned forward slightly. The others will focus on relations with neighboring pacts, border negotiations, trade agreements, all vital functions. But not my function? I asked, confusion creeping in. Your primary responsibility will be more specialized. I want you to serve as our liaison to human settlements. Surprise rendered me momentarily speechless. Relations with humans were virtually non-existent. Centuries of mutual suspicion and occasional violence had left a chasm between our kinds that few had attempted to bridge. May I ask why? I finally managed. Because you question tradition without rejecting it entirely. Because you value wisdom regardless of its source. His expression grew more serious. And because the isolation of our kind cannot continue if we hope to survive another century. The conviction in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't merely a diplomatic initiative, but something deeply personal to him, a vision of the future he was determined to realize. Humans fear what they don't understand, I said carefully. And we've given them little opportunity to understand us. He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Exactly. Fear breeds conflict. Understanding creates possibility. It won't be easy, I cautioned. Centuries of separation have left both sides with deeply ingrained prejudices, which is precisely why I need someone with patience, insight, and the courage to challenge assumptions. His gaze held mine. Someone like you. The weight of his trust settled over me, daunting yet strangely exhilarating. This was more than a position. It was an opportunity to reshape the future relationship between our kinds. I accept, I said simply. Relief flashed briefly across his features before his composure returned. Good. You'll receive specialized training before your first assignment. And, he hesitated uncharacteristically, I'll be personally overseeing much of your preparation. Something shifted in the air between us. A subtle change in energy that made my heart beat faster, despite my efforts to remain professionally composed. I'll do my best to learn quickly, I promised. He rose, signaling the end of our meeting. Your things will be transported to the Central Territory tomorrow. The Eastern Residence has been prepared for you. The Eastern Residence, one of the finest dwellings in the Central Territory, typically reserved for visiting dignitaries. The assignment spoke volumes about the importance he placed on this new initiative. I stood, inclining my head respectfully. Thank you for this opportunity, Alpha King. Vincent, he said unexpectedly. When we're working together directly, I prefer Vincent. The informality startled me, but I nodded. Vincent, then. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me at the threshold. Eleanor, the pendant you wear, it was your mother's, yes? I touched the silver piece at my throat, surprised by the personal question. Yes. Her final gift to me. He nodded, as though confirming something to himself. It suits you. The simple statement carried a weight I couldn't fully decipher, but warmth bloomed in my chest nonetheless as I departed. The celebration at Mara's home that evening was thankfully modest. A small gathering of close friends, good food, and quiet conversation, rather than the boisterous festivities I'd dreaded. As midnight approached, I slipped away, needing solitude to process the day's events. My feet carried me once more to the lake's edge, where stars reflected like scattered diamonds across the still water. Tomorrow would bring profound change, a new home, new responsibilities, a new chapter of life I had never anticipated. I thought I might find you here, came a familiar voice from the shadows. I turned, no longer startled by Vincent's ability to approach undetected. It seems to be becoming our meeting place, I observed. He joined me by the water, his powerful presence somehow comforting rather than intimidating now. Do you regret accepting the position? Not regret, no. Perhaps apprehension mixed with excitement. I studied his profile in the moonlight. This initiative means a great deal to you. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. More than most understand. He gazed across the water, his expression softening with memory. During my travels among humans, I met a woman, a healer who saved my life when I was gravely wounded. She knew what I was, yet helped me anyway. The personal revelation surprised me. Vincent rarely spoke of his past. She wasn't afraid. She was terrified, he admitted, but her compassion outweighed her fear. She said something I've never forgotten. Different blood, same heart. The simple phrase lingered in the night air, profound in its elemental truth. She showed me that coexistence is possible, he continued. Not easy, not immediate, but possible. That vision has guided me since becoming Alpha. Understanding dawned. That's why you created these positions. Why you're risking tradition for change. He turned to face me fully, moonlight illuminating the conviction in his features. Some traditions deserve preservation. Others are chains disguised as protection. The words resonated deeply with my own unspoken thoughts. We stood in companionable silence for several minutes, the gentle lapping of water against the shore, the only sound between us. Tomorrow begins your new role, Vincent said finally. Are you ready? I touched my mother's pendant, drawing strength from the connection to her memory. Ready to try. Ready to learn. That, he said softly, is all anyone can ask. He extended his hand toward me, not the formal gesture of help he'd offered earlier, but an invitation. An equal standing beside equal. I placed my hand in his, feeling calluses that spoke of strength tested in battle, yet a gentleness that belied his powerful exterior. His fingers closed around mine, warm and secure. You're mine now, he said, his voice low and intense. My diplomat, my representative, my voice among humans. But something in his eyes suggested another meaning entirely, one that sent a shiver of anticipation through me despite all rational thought. Yours, I agreed, the word carrying its own weight in the space between us. As we stood hand in hand beneath the vast canopy of stars, I thought of Garrett's cruel dismissal, too old to be a bride, and how quickly circumstances could change. Not just through Vincent's intervention, but through my own courage to step forward when opportunity appeared. My mother's words returned to me. This will remind you of your worth when others forget. But perhaps the greater truth was learning to remember my worth for myself, and finding others who saw it clearly without reminder. Tomorrow would bring challenge, change, and possibility. But tonight, in this moment beside the still waters, I was exactly where I belonged.